A very exciting race, won, of course, by Lando Norris from pole position, joined on the podium by Kimi Antonelli, his best ever finish in his rather young career. But Max Verstappen alongside, going all the way from the pit lane to P3. Excellent recovery that we'll get into on this episode, Sam. The content gods, they have given us a sacrifice we are ever grateful.
Thank you to the content gods. All hail the racing and content gods, because we had a banger weekend of racing, and that race really was something to behold. Brazil always delivers, and it's just a little cherry on the top right now because it was already good. But that fight right at the end between the podium battle, spicy. We're going to get into that very soon.
There's a lot to get through. We're going to, of course, give out our moment of the race much later on in the episode. An epic scrap in the midfield where about 10 cars finished within about 5 seconds at the flag. 2 of those cars not in that fight were the Ferraris, a double DNF for them. Of course, Oscar Piastri losing more ground in the championship, as does Max Verstappen, because of Lando Norris's win. He now holds a 24-point advantage over Oscar Piastri in the championship fight, 49 points back to Max Verstappen in third. We know he wrapped up the pole position quite convincingly yesterday, Sam. It's not, he didn't have the Grand Slam today, he didn't have the fastest lap, he didn't lead every lap, but it did feel as if he never fully lost control of this Grand Prix. What did you make of it?
Choo-choo, because the Lando train has left the station. That boy be pulling towards World Championship destination right now. He at one point had led 100 laps in a row. He has now picked up another victory, 2 in a row for him, which is just, the form keeps on rolling. The stat that got brought out that we have had 7 victories in a row this season from pole position, the record being 8 in a row. Ben, you may need to correct me, the last being 1964, the last time we got 8 in a row.
I was there. I remember.
I don't remember. I'm not that old. You're apparently ancient.
Yeah.
But the fact that qualifying is so important tells you that getting that pole position, that front row start, is essential. And Lando Norris has really recovered that form when it came to qualifying, always consistent in his qualifying, but never able to reach the heights of regular pole positions until this latter stage of the season. And that has paid dividends again for him here in Brazil. He controlled this race so well. It never felt like he had the outright dominance of which he had in Mexico. And you know what? Doesn't matter. Didn't need it. No fastest lap, no Grand Slam. He still hasn't got a Grand Slam in his career. He might get a World Championship win before he gets a Grand Slam at this point, which should be something to write home about. But he just controlled it really well. There was some uncertainty with the tyre. The hard tyre didn't come into any fruition, so they didn't want to go onto that one. Had to make the 2-stop work, where the 1-stop looked very tricky to execute. You had the run from Max Verstappen coming through the field, Antonelli looking very quick. And yet in all this, Lando Norris stays exquisitely calm and delivers a brilliant race, extending his championship lead to 24 points. Everything is currently going the right way for Lando Norris. Ben, how do you think it went?
As well as it looked. Sure, this wasn't the same result that we had in Mexico, where he was winning that race by half a minute, but he'll take a 10-second victory. I'm not sure he's going to complain too much about how it happens at this very important juncture in the season. He was very good again. And there have been areas of concern that we've had with Norris throughout this season to this point. And he seems to be answering nearly all of those questions very effectively in these last few Grand Prix. We've had concerns about qualifying and being able to really put everything together when it matters. 2 for 2 in terms of pole positions this weekend. We've had concerns about his race starts as well. He hasn't always been brilliant when it comes to the start of Grand Prix, and indeed restarts as well when a safety car peels in or even a VSC comes in. He managed all of those effectively again today. I guess he had 3 to deal with. He had the race start, a VSC restart, and a safety car restart. And at none of them did you feel like he was under really any pressure at all. And Norris and McLaren, fair play to them, they could have got wrapped up strategically with what Antonelli was doing, of course, starting on the soft tyre rather than the medium tyre that Norris did. They could have got wrapped up in what Verstappen was doing. That could have very easily been quite a big distraction for their overall game plan. They kind of just got on with what they thought was the best way to attack this Grand Prix, which was that medium soft, medium strategy. And they played it brilliantly well. They weren't fazed about Verstappen on that second pit stop. They decided to go for it anyway. And that win margin in the end was quite comfortable. we didn't hear a lot or see a lot of him, which again is proof that it was relatively comfortable.
He definitely had a few hurdles to overcome as well. This wasn't as plain sailing as Mexico. The VSC restart with his title rival right behind him, Oscar Piastri. You know, there was a chance there that a lockup could ensue, a little running wide moment. If Piastri gets the better restart, are they wheel to wheel? And who's got more to lose? Currently, Lando. Handling it so well. And within a lap, I think he's 1.3 up on his teammate, which just shows you the level of pace difference. He also has to overtake Max Verstappen. You remember this time last year, the moment he went near Max Verstappen, Lando Norris would find himself about 8 car lengths off the road. So the fact that he so confidently glides past the reigning world champion, it just shows you the evolution, the development that Lando Norris has gone through in the last kind of 24 races, from the end of last season through to the peak of what we're at now. He's really developed to come a long way, and he's putting all of the ingredients into the recipe. You know what? That cake, Ben, it's very nearly baked.
It's very nearly baked indeed. Very good time to run into a very good run of form over these last few races, because now with that 24-point advantage, and I'm sure we'll discuss this a bit more in Patreon episodes and, you know, other episodes that are outside of this race review. But that does give him a bit of a buffer now in that coming into this weekend, he didn't need to win a Grand Prix over Verstappen in order to win the championship. He now doesn't need necessarily to win a Grand Prix versus Piastri. Like, if he were to finish second place in all 3 races left and the one remaining sprint we have, that would be enough to seal the title. So if there is an error somewhere in the locker of Lando Norris, and from experience, maybe there is, it might not be the end of the world at this point. So very interesting to see what happens with those remaining 3 Grand Prix. Max Verstappen, of course, we need to talk about him. Qualified 16th place, left him in a really tough spot going into this Grand Prix. We speculated on yesterday's qualifying review, would they go for a pit lane start? Of course, that would drop him back a few more positions, but it would give them full flexibility on what they wanted to do under parc fermé conditions, to be able to break parc fermé conditions and go with a bit of a new setup. They decided to do that, and oh boy, I think we can say it worked. 20th to 3rd place, or pit lane to 3rd place. No mean feat, Sam.
I mean, don't let anyone tell you it's just the car that makes the difference in these racing situations. You saw what it was like in qualifying yesterday. You saw the pace it was able to deploy. There wasn't any. The fact that he was legitimately out in Q1, the pace being about half a second at least off of his slowest time in the sprint qualifying a couple of days before this, shows you the evolution a car can make, all the devolution as it actually went through. Breaking parc fermé, starting from the pit lane, was the right move. And it's so clearly the right move because they got that car into a window where he felt comfortable. He felt happy. I'm not sure it was in its peak. I'm sure there's way more that Max would have liked from it. But watching Max Verstappen overtake people when he's got the bit between his teeth is such a wonderful sight. Good Lord, can that man hustle a Formula One car? When you see him, the overtake he put on Russell towards the end of that Grand Prix, I know Russell was struggling on brakes a little bit. The way he swooped around the outside into turn 1, there was just no risk in his mind. He was like, I'm getting the job done. And he demonstrated that time and time again throughout the grid, just making overtakes wherever it suited him, however it suited him, made tyres last longer than they should have done. I know he only finished 3rd, a fair play to Kimi Antonelli, who we will get onto with the drive that he had today, but exquisite to go from pit lane to P3. I was so impressed even again. It's so hard to keep talking about Max Verstappen like this. I can't say too many more things about how great he is, but what a performance.
Yeah, and this race unfolded very well for him. And part of that is down to how the Grand Prix unfolded itself, but a lot of that is down to what he was able to do. He was able to make clinical overtakes at appropriate times and not really put his car at any risk. Any unnecessary risk, which is really easy to do when you are starting from the pit lane, because you know you're going to be wheel to wheel with several cars that if you're Verstappen, you're not usually wheel to wheel with. And you've got to come out the other side of every single one of those scraps with the car intact. And that's how it went down. Took advantage of the couple of Ferrari DNFs, of course, very early on. Maybe I don't want to say fortunate because he was unfortunate to pick it up in the first place, but I think the timing of his puncture was about as good of a timing of a puncture as you can possibly get, because not only did he manage to make that stop under a VSC, it also got him off some hard tyres that I don't know whether he would have liked, given a few more racing laps with them. No one meshed well with the hard tyre today. If anyone could, it would have been Verstappen, but I don't think he would have been too disappointed to get rid of that set. And then from there, on a couple of sets of mediums, on that final set of soft tyres, he showed what tremendous pace he had to recover to, let's face it, probably about where he would have finished anyway if they hadn't deviated away from a better setup, I think, after the sprint race on Saturday. I'm not sure whether maybe he would have been there with Norris, maybe he wouldn't have been. I don't know. And it's still not a great result for him overall when it comes to the championship. He's now looking at 49 points back to Norris, but it could have been absolutely over. Instead, we're maybe looking at he's still got a 5% chance in there.
Yeah, I see the point you're making. I do think they've missed out on P2. I think that if they had that set up right in the first place, even if he started 7th, 8th, and the qualifying pace wasn't exactly where they wanted it to be, but they knew the race pace was going to be stronger. I think the Mercedes would have been beatable for Verstappen. He lost better. Yeah, so what, 3 points is lost out on there. It's not disastrous, but every little helps, as Asda once said. And I think Verstappen would like to be shopping there right now. God, I sound like Crofty with these lines.
You do.
Good Lord, it's atrocious. Off to Vegas we go.
Don't say it.
He's exquisite, but the guy that finished in front of him, I also thought had a really brilliant Grand Prix. Ben, Kimi Antonelli is the best result he's had all season. What are your thoughts?
Oh, he was excellent, yeah. I mean, his pace throughout this weekend was, it's not just this Grand Prix finish. It was the entire weekend where it felt like he was the stronger Mercedes, maybe only marginally. But, the way in which he held off George Russell, particularly in that final stint, was a bit of a sign, I think, going forward. It wasn't that long ago that Mercedes would have still had some fairly pressing questions about Antonelli going into 2026, when, of course, his performance gets more important for their objectives. But I think he's at least answered some of them over this last half a dozen race, and probably most so here. He got P2, and he thoroughly deserved it for that brilliant defense. But, if it was all in the car, George Russell would have been alongside him. So well done to him.
Yeah, I think we have arrived at Kimi Antonelli. I think he is here now. It was before Mexico that he not beating George Russell once in a full-length Grand Prix race, and yet we now leave Brazil where he's beating him not once but twice in a row, beating him in qualifying, beating him in the sprint. This was truly Antonelli's best weekend in Formula One, and it looks like he's finally beginning to elevate himself, and this feels like it's at the perfect moment to do so. If he could go out of this 2025 season feeling this strong, this confident, right on a par with George Russell in more races than he's not, if they've got the car to compete in 2026, and that lineup could be what they were hoping it was going to be much earlier in this season.
There's one last thing we need to get to when it comes to Max Verstappen, because there have been some questions about whether they should have taken that final pit stop or not to go onto the soft tyre, and whether they should have tried their best to hold off Lando Norris and maybe then still pick up P2 on that medium compound. Verstappen did pit, 16 laps before Lando Norris did, so he would have been at a tyre deficit, but Lando Norris did go on to some slightly more worn tyres, so I don't think the advantage was quite as many laps as it looked. Could they have played it that way?
Yeah, and I think they should have played it that way. You look at the way that Lawson and Hulkenberg were gunning for the one stop, and yes, they fell into the pack behind them, but the gaps out front were far larger, far more extended than the gaps in that kind of late point midfield battle where you had, as you mentioned at the start of this race, where it looked like Liam Lawson was pulling along an entire train of Formula One cars behind him. The gaps were significant. If Lando Norris does get past you, you have another 10 seconds at that point to Kimi Antonelli. Okay, if he does get past you, you've got another 3 or 4 seconds back to George Russell. So you've got time to play with here. And knowing Max Verstappen, he could have easily put together 7 or 8 laps of tyre conservation to then push forward after Norris had caught him, after he used a little bit of DRS for a lap or so following Norris before he probably would have inevitably pulled away. So I think P2 was far more on the cards had they gone for the, I say one stop, because obviously he had to make the stop under the BSC to go off those hard tyres. But I think it was very much plausible, very much feasible. I do think they probably dropped 3 points there as well. But in hindsight, with all the drama going on, all the changes they made, I respect what they did. It's not a massive loss, but I do think it was on the cards.
It was close. Yeah, I think it was real close. But I am inclined to say the same thing, where I think it might have been worth them giving this a go, at least until Lando Norris got by, at which point I think you then bring him into the pits to attack with the soft tyres for not quite as long as he needed in the end, but he would have at least still had those soft tyres on for a little bit. A bit of a UK football reference here, but one I'm sure you'll be very aware of is when you've got, ironically, we're talking about the relegation zone here rather than the top of the order that we're obviously referencing here. Whenever you get like a battle between a 17th and an 18th place team in the Premier League, it's often referred to as a 6-pointer. And the reason it's called a relegation 6-pointer is it's not only worth 3 points to you if you win it, you are costing the other team 3 points because they have lost to you. And that's why I think the play might have been stay out there. It's not that Verstappen would have gained 7 points if he'd finished first rather than second. It's that Lando Norris also loses the 7 points as a result of being second. You could argue that's worth 14 points. So I actually think the risk of that play would have been worth it, because even if he drops down to fourth rather than third, yes, it's not ideal and you've cost yourself 3 points. You haven't cost yourself 3 points to a rival. George Russell and Antonelli are not in this title fight. So I think it probably was the right call to stay out there. I don't like going against Red Bull because they get it right more often than not. But there was definitely a case for it.
And hindsight's a wonderful thing.
It is.
We could sit there and pick and choose everything after we've seen the action. So they're a tough choice to make. Maybe they cost themselves.
We'll get into Oscar Piastri's Grand Prix now, and there's plenty to talk about in terms of his overall pace, the fact that he finished P5 just behind George Russell for 10 points, but 10 points, 10 seconds is what we're going to focus on first, because that's what he got as a result of that first corner incident with himself and Antonelli, which of course then caused Charles Leclerc's retirement on the outside of that corner. We'll talk about the Ferrari side of this later on in the episode, I think, but oh boy. In terms of Piastri up the inside, that 10-second penalty, do you agree with it?
Oh, Piastri, my guy, you're on a generationally bad run right now. It is now over 2 months without a podium, and you're the championship leader for the majority of the season. That is crazy form turnaround. Do you deserve 10 seconds? I think I'm against the popular vote here. I don't think he does deserve 10 seconds. I think the reason why he's been given 10 seconds is due to a lack of control of the car where he locked up the inside tyre. But he was alongside Kimi Antonelli, comfortably alongside Kimi Antonelli, before the braking zone had properly ensued. Charles Leclerc doesn't know he's there. Kimi Antonelli's sandwiched between two cars. For me, this is a classic restart style incident of coming together in turn one, where 3 cars into one don't go. Someone is most likely going to lose out, and Charles Leclerc was the car that lost out in the end there. So it was ambitious, it was punchy, but that's also what I want to see from Oscar Piastri, and I do think he was firmly alongside and had claimed the corner, in the wonderful words of the FIA steward. So for me, I think it was harsh, but I'm willing to listen to other stories.
Yeah, I think I might have completely lost the plot here, because I'm exactly the same.
I'm seeing arguments everywhere that he deserves it fully.
Yeah. I don't see it that way either. I think this was a racing incident. If you had to absolutely blame it on someone, I would look at Antonelli before I looked at Piastri. But I would call it a racing incident, in all honesty. He was alongside. He was fine to try and make that move, even if you don't think it was wise of him to make that move. He was entitled to it. And I don't care that he's locked up, because even with him locking up, he is still tied to the inside of that corner. There have been plenty of incidents that have been penalised where a driver on the inside has locked up and clearly hasn't made the apex and then steered into another car. And in that instance, I'm always for the driver on the inside trying to make that overtake, getting the penalty. And that might have happened if Antonelli isn't as close to him as he was. He might have careered right off into the side of Leclerc himself, in which case that's an obvious penalty. But I don't think the lockup plays into this at all. He is still, when that incident occurs, doing everything right. At least in my eyes.
Inside curb. He's got 2 as firmly on the inside curb. And what's frustrating me even more about the penalty is that we saw a very similar incident with Lawson and Bearman in turn 4, and the penalty has been given differently here. And that's because I think the stewards have judged it again based on the outcome of the incident rather than the actual contact that has been given via the incident, which I don't think is fair. 5 seconds for Lawson hitting Bearman, but 10 seconds for Piastri for colliding with Antonelli. and then he hit Leclerc. So for me, I think he's been hard done by.
I think there's two questions here, and we've almost answered the first part of the question in terms of our opinion on should it have been a penalty. I think the second part of the question is, should he have made the move? Because there is a world in which he is not penalised for this, but it's maybe still not the best idea, knowing that there are two cars on the outside and this sort of thing was possible. Not in terms of him picking up a penalty even, but potentially damage. Like he could have incurred damage that had required a pit stop or even put him
wiped him out of the race. Yeah.
Exactly. So should he have tried to make this move?
Now, I think you have to ask, if you're Oscar Piastri, you have to ask yourself a question. Am I going for the race win or am I going for second place? And I think the differentiation is very, very different. If he's leading this championship, if he's Lando Norris making that move, you can sit there and say, all right, I'm going to lose some points, but second place, I still walk away from here in the lead of this championship. And therefore, you don't make that move because you can go, right, I think I've got the pace over Antonelli. I think I've got the pace over Leclerc. I can get them over the course of this Grand Prix. And therefore, the move is too risky. And you're putting yourself and your car at risk, which might cost you, as we just said, a DNF, which is terrible news. But if you're going for the lead, you've got to get past these two as soon as possible, because with the pace that Lando Norris had out front, you've got to get that chance done. Then. So that's why I think he's gone for it. And you know what? I think he's justified to go for it as well, because he's got to clear the traffic for any hope, any chance that if Norris makes a mistake, there's a bad pit stop, which we've seen a few times previously, even if you think you can hold on to the back of him and get a late move, maybe with some tyre wear changes, he has to be behind him. He can't have cars in the way, and it's got to be done there. So if he was going for second, he could wait, but he ain't. He's got to go for this race win. And so he had to throw everything at the wall. He did. For me, he didn't do anything wrong. The stewards saw it different.
It's tough in terms of whether he should have gone for this, because as you say, if he wants any chance at fighting for the lead of this Grand Prix, he needs to clear that traffic, I think, straight away. I think Lando Norris had proven to that point in the weekend he probably had a pace advantage, but even if they were at the same pace, he's not going to catch up to him if they're just matching each other's lap times. So I think he needs to get by almost straight away. I think the thing I'm considering here is there's no version of that move that ends at turn one. So let's say Antonelli and Piastri don't have contact. There's no version of Piastri getting second place at turn one. The only way he gets second place, ironically, he got it via the contact, but without contact, the only way he gets it is down into turn 2, 3, and 4. He's either continuing to attack in those corners or he's holding them off. There's no way he just gets that overtake done and he's in the clear. And I just don't know whether he felt that having like the inside then of almost turn 3 would have given him enough of an advantage to keep that spot, because we also saw drivers get a bit boxed out on the inside of that corner, in which case he might have been struggling anyway. I don't know whether it would have been more prudent to apply the brakes a little bit sooner, get in the slipstream of probably Antonelli, watch Antonelli and Leclerc battle in front of you, and pick at least one of them off as a result of that battle. Again, hindsight, but I don't know.
Yeah, hindsight's 2020. And you're right. We saw a lot. I mean, that is the beauty of Interlagos. The first 3 corners, that complex of the Senna S's going through the Curva del Sol, allows you to run side by side. You could go right wide through turn 1. You could go down the inside. You could switch back through turn 2, going wide way around turn 3. DRS is available for most of the laps. It's a beautiful complex of corners, and it opens up so much wheel-to-wheel racing. And we saw that a lot throughout this Grand Prix. Hajar and Gasly went through it together about 27 times. Hajar's reaction after fighting Gasly was hilarious. The way he told him, please don't shout at me, okay? I'm sorry. It's a great reaction, by the way.
Definitely wasn't shouting, by the way.
Just talking clearly over a radio in a highly intense situation.
Yeah.
Loved that from Hajar. Fair play. But that's the beauty of these 4 corners that go all the way down to that heavy braking zone in turn 4, is that you can pick about 8 different methods to go through it. And I do think you're right. If he could slow down time and play exactly how he would want it, the way he planned it, even without the contact, I think he's suboptimal. And I actually think slowing the car, getting a different line out of 2 for a better run down to 4 is probably the most optimal way of making the overtake on at least 1. And then once DRS is activated or the car in front doesn't have it, you might have a good chance of getting past. But we did see time and time again that DRS passes when your tyres are very equal. Not as simple as it sounds.
Indeed. I think the slightly more concerning thing when it comes to Piastri is the fact that even with the penalty, he got into P2, had a bit of a clear run at Lando Norris, couldn't really keep up with him. And you could make the argument at this point, he knows the penalty's coming. So he is got one eye on that. And in that regard is trying to go longer than Lando Norris. We know that in that first stint, Piastri put 9 laps more on those tyres than what Norris did. Even so, you wanted to see him keep within a couple of seconds, I think.
That would have been the optimal way to run that race, even with the penalty, because you never know if a safety car comes out. You never know if there's an issue or a DNF or something like that, because the way his pace unfolded, I think once he knew the penalty was coming, I think he was all at sea. I think he's so frustrating in that car. He's watching this world championship fall away from him in front of his eyes. And whether you agree with it or not, a lot of it is to blame on him and how he's performing right now. It's not like he's having engine failures that are putting him out of a championship fight here. It's happening all on the racetrack. And I think he's so frustrated with it. It's metastasizing into slow pace. It's causing his car to not react the same way that Norris is acting. And I think the way that after the VSC restart, you saw him have one sniff of a chance of getting past him. And then Norris was just gone. They weren't even close. It's not like he kept him in DRS range for 6-7 laps. It was a lap. He had 1 lap of DRS range. It's not good enough from Oscar Piastri. He's got 3 races to pull something out of the hat. Otherwise, it's bye-bye.
P5 for him in the end, very nearly P4 with his battle with George Russell. We saw kind of 2 battles happening concurrently towards the end of this Grand Prix. We had Verstappen versus Antonelli that we mostly covered before the break. We've got Russell versus Piastri. Of course, that does mean TV direction needs to give us an unchallenged Lando Norris crossing the line. Good work again.
We've got cars drag racing to the start-finish line, and Antonelli's making a mistake on the final lap, and I barely get to see it. You having me on?
At this point, Sam, we know that that's always going to happen, I'm afraid.
Yeah, make sure you subscribe to the £99.99 crash package so you can actually see those updates.
Yep. What did you make of the Russell versus Piastri battle? Is Piastri doing enough to get by?
It's not a battle, is it? He didn't even get close to have a proper go at him, I don't think. Not enough from what I was expecting. With the pace that McLaren is clearly able to deploy, with the fact that Max Verstappen was able to clear George Russell so easily, starting that much further back from him. I know that Piastri's got a penalty, but even with a 10-second penalty in that McLaren, you should be right there with Max Verstappen. You should still be challenging for a podium. And I think the fact that Russell is complaining of brake issues, comedically so again over the radio, thank you, George, I do think that he's got to get in front of George Russell. Mercedes have won both battles that they've had today. Antonelli's beaten Max Verstappen and George Russell has beaten Oscar Piastri. And that's a great day for Mercedes when they look like, I don't know, they were starting to flounder from this second place battle in the championship. They pulled some points back on, definitely on Ferrari, of course, but even on Max Verstappen here in Red Bull. I was expecting Piastri to have a go, and it's just another telling result that, again, Piastri can't get past the first hurdle, let alone the tough one at the end of the battle.
Yeah, I thought he might have a shot at it. He had pretty comparable tyres to George Russell in that final stint. I think, at least in terms of when they stopped, Piastri came in 3 laps later than George Russell did. It's difficult to say whether it was exactly 3 laps separating them in terms of tyre life, because so many drivers were going on to marginally used sets of compounds today. But you would have felt with fairly close to a 50-50 battle in terms of tyres that Piastri would be able to close up on Russell. He definitely did that, but then not enough to get the overtake done as well. It's a tough one to reason with, just based on, I know Antonelli started in front of him, but Russell was behind him. Verstappen was a long way behind him, and to lose 15 points to the championship leader and some points to Verstappen too, tough to reason with.
Yeah, agreed.
Well, shall we, says the unprepared Ben Hocking, have a look at driver of the day?
Oh, go on then.
The verdict is in. You're the driver of the day. You're the driver of the day. You're good at driving.
I mean, I feel like there are a number of contenders for this, even though the public vote was fairly one-sided. I think that does a bit of a disjustice to at least 3 other drivers in the mix here.
I fully agree. When you've gone into a supermarket and you're like, I don't get a basket. But then you get to the till and you've literally got like a handful of stuff. You're like, I really should have picked up a basket. That is how this driver of the day vote has turned out for me. Can I go through and be like, it's fine, there'll probably be one or two. And I've got like 6. Oh God, I nearly dropped Gasly. Oh, I've nearly dropped Bearman over here. For me though, Max Verstappen is going to take it. Pit lane to podium. I think if we've got Antonelli as well, that really would have been the cherry on the top for me. But this is still more than enough. He dealt with a slow puncture. I know it came out in the right way for him, but he still had to contend with that. To go through that many cars, like a car that was struggling that much the day before, setup changes accepted, of course, that was phenomenal. But there were some great performances that maybe we can discuss a little bit more after you've given your verdict for driver of the day.
Yeah, it's really tough, mainly because it's so difficult to compare these potential driver of the days as well. Like you can put up Lando Norris on one side and say he won by 10 seconds and couldn't really have done anything more. And then you look at Max Verstappen, who's had a scintillating recovery from the pit lane all the way to the podium. And it's very difficult to compare those two races because they're nothing like each other. It's not like Lando Norris could have done what Max Verstappen did because he started from pole position. And should he be disadvantaged as a result of that? Then again, you cannot ignore what Max Verstappen did. It was utterly ridiculous. And as a result of that, I've decided to distance myself from that argument and give it to Ollie Bearman instead.
Whee.
You know what? He won the midfield battle by a pit stop. And I appreciate at least some of that is down to Lawson holding everyone up, but his pace was really good again. I know it's not quite the P4 that he had in Mexico. I think it's probably about as good.
Dare I say better than Mexico?
I think Haas's pace was a bit better in Mexico versus the front runners, whereas here there was still a considerable gap between Verstappen, Mercedes and McLaren back to Haas and the rest of the midfield, but even with needing to make a lot of overtakes, which a lot of them were very good, by the way.
They were.
Yeah. It was very good. Very good.
23 seconds back to the car behind you, Liam Lawson. That is spectacular in that Haas. See, the last 2 Grand Prix, Ollie Bearman, you put yourself on the map, sir.
Indeed. From positive to negative, I'm afraid it's time for worst driver of the day.
Get in the bin, worst driver of the day. Bin, worst driver of the day. You suck at driving.
Who gets this one?
Oh, there's some corkers here as well. Whenever there's a lot of good, there's quite often a lot of bad when it comes to Formula One. And I've got the 3 that are sitting all in an order pretty much right at the bottom of this Grand Prix. And that is between Lance Stroll, Yuki Tsunoda, and Lewis Hamilton for me. I think I'm going to give it to, it feels a bit unfair, but I'm going to go Yuki Tsunoda. Absolutely punts Lance. Was it Lance Stroll? Was it Alonso he punted?
Yeah.
It was Stroll. Absolutely punts Lance Stroll into that corner. Basically gets it all wrong, gets out of shape, locks up into a corner, dodges one car, goes straight to the back of the other. And then even when he is running around, the pace is so far off. It's so poor. He can't stick with anyone, can't make moves, isn't moving up. Max Verstappen's in front of him after about 6 laps, even though he started from the pit lane. I mentioned Hamilton. I think that's a fair shout. The move on Colapinto, whilst I think there's a tiny bit of movement in there. What are you doing, lad? What are you doing?
It's
why are you
so
driving? Why are you driving into the back of him? What are you doing? And I don't judge his pace after that incident. I think the car's ruined at that point. But that's why I haven't given it to Hamilton. His mistake was bad. But Tsunoda just had a really slow race after also making a mistake that cost him dearly.
Yeah, I've gone with Tsunoda as well. I didn't actually consider Lance Stroll for this one. I think that Aston Martin was in race trim just not all that good. And
no, I think you're right. I think I forgot that he was the one punting around by Tsunoda.
Yeah, that doesn't help either. And he and Alonso, even with Lawson holding everyone up, were set to be about 2 seconds apart, I think. So I think he's had far worse races this season. So I didn't really consider Lance Stroll for this one. But Yuki Tsunoda was my worst driver of the day because I don't want to say it's funny because that's harsh, but when you go back onto a replay of an incident and you know it's with Lance Stroll and you see in front of Tsunoda is one not Lance Stroll and you're like, well, how is he? Clearly there's a graphic error here or we're looking at the wrong replay. Nope, we're looking at the right replay. The graphics are all correct. He has just completely avoided the car in front of him to go into the side of Lance Stroll. So not a brilliant race for him. Even from there, his pace wasn't brilliant, but he
also put Bortoletto in the wall, didn't he?
I thought Bortoletto did that by himself.
Do you think so?
I'll need to see it again. I think that was on Gabriel Bortoletto.
There was a little bit on that. Also, speaking of the graphics, you brought that up. They were very slow to update today. There was a lot of times an overtake happened. It took a good 3-4 corners for them to swap around the positions. Just a minor bugbear for me.
Well, yeah. I don't think we actually mentioned it in yesterday's review, but the timing tower was fully broken for like 15 minutes. And because there were no overtakes going on, well done, Sprints. I don't think anyone realised.
No.
There was one overtake, and I think it was Hadjar and Bortoletto maybe, and they were clearly not in the right order, but they clearly just didn't notice.
Good job, F1.
Yeah. Right, from worst driver of the day, we go to Big Brain Strat.
Bob, we're gonna need you to box for wets. What? It's not even raining out. What are you talking about? Yeah, and Bob, if you get a chance, let your teammate pass you. What? He crashed out. He's not even in the race.
I feel like, as is usually the case with Big Brain Strat, Sam, we have the option to go silly or serious with this because there were some seriously good calls out there today. There were also some very funny ones.
Yeah, I'm going to go silly because silly's always more fun. But there were some great strategies, and maybe we'll discuss that afterwards. My favourite bit was when Lewis Hamilton picked up a 5-second time penalty. And at that point, he had been destroying his rear tyres. He already pitted a couple of times because of, had those changes made. And instead of telling him that he's got a 5-second time penalty and then making him serve it, they went, we'll just bring the car in to retire it. We don't want to tell Lewis Hamilton that he's...
Did they not serve it?
I don't think they ever served it. Unless I'm going absolutely bonkers.
Well, we didn't see him serve it at the very least, but
If he hasn't served it, that's hilarious. If he has served it and I've missed it, well, that's hilarious on me.
Well, we remember Perez from a couple of years ago at Suzuka, right? Where
they made him go back out and go round again.
Yeah, just to serve the penalty. So if Ferrari haven't served the penalty, which will now carry over, that would be quite funny.
Willing to be corrected, though, if I've got that wrong.
We were, at least in terms of TV direction, a long way off Lewis Hamilton at that point. My big brain strat, and I preface this by going, should we go silly versus serious? And you've gone with silly, so I'll also go with silly. Late break in F1 podcast. I have gone for, this is basically becoming Haas corner at this point because I just love Haas strategies.
Bloody Ocon.
Right, so with Ocon, and it's always with Ocon.
Always Ocon.
I don't know whether it was purely strategic. Maybe he, like Verstappen, picked up a puncture or something. But they decided to make him pit after we get a safety car. If you want to make a pit stop under a safety car, makes sense. You lose less time. If you want to make a pit stop under a VSC, like Verstappen did, makes sense. You lose less time. They decided to wait until the lap after the VSC came in, almost the first real green flag lap that we had. And then they decided to pit him, at which point he's 15 seconds behind the rest of the field. The fact that he's in that group at the end isn't too shabby, I don't think. But I don't know, he was just at a massive disadvantage from lap 8.
Someone needs a word. Someone needs a word on that side of the garage because the strategy calls for Ocon have been abysmal this season.
Maybe it wasn't purely strategic. Maybe it was damage, but I just thought that was quite funny yet again. Well, Red Bull managed to pick up some good points today with Verstappen finishing on the podium. Another podium for Mercedes, and indeed George Russell not far off finishing in the top 3 as well. And all of that means that Ferrari, who at one point looked a pretty good bet to finish P2 in the Constructors' Championship, now looking at P4 directly in the face after, for the 3rd time this season, picking up no points. We had that double disqualification earlier in the year at China, the double DNF at Zandvoort, and lo and behold, it's another double DNF here. I mean, we should start with Leclerc because we blame Ferrari for a lot. Not much they can do about that one.
Oh, that poor guy. Come on. He's done such a brilliant job in qualifying, getting it inside the top 3. He's made some changes to that car and they've put in a performance. Well, sorry, when I say they, he is putting a performance that I think has maximized everything that Ferrari can do because that Ferrari is pants, let's face it. And the fact that he started P3 and got away well. Well done. Right alongside Kimi Antonelli at one point. You think he could get second place here. Around the outside. This is great. Oh, I've lost my wheel. It's rolling down the road like a mink polo, I think Martin Brundle said at one point. Quite comedically funny, actually, the way that tyre just fell off his car and rolled off. I don't know how he got all the way from turn 3 to turn 4 with a broken car.
You know what's most savage about the incident is that it's basically wheel-to-wheel contact. It could have very easily saw both of them out. It could have seen neither of them out. It could have seen one of them just need a pit stop to replace the tyre rather than them being out the race. It could have been Antonelli that was out and not Leclerc. And it just had to be the one instance where it's Leclerc that's out and Antonelli has no damage at all.
And neither is Piastri. They just drive on.
Yeah.
Cheers. Oh, a little bit. Rubbing is racing, they say as they go about the rest of their day. And poor Leclerc, old man Leclerc, limping away with 3 wheels and the wheels beating him down the track. Oh, you got to feel sorry for him. He's putting such a shift this season, picking up podiums, dragging that car where it shouldn't be. And he was on for another one today, and it would have been really interesting to see where Charles Leclerc would have featured in this battle with Antonelli, Verstappen, Russell, and Piastri, because I think he had a good shout at fighting for that kind of final podium spot. This is a real kick for Leclerc. But you know what's not a real kick for? Ferrari. You deserve 4th in the championship because you've been rubbish.
It's just a shame on the one weekend where Leclerc is able to get a bit more out of qualifying versus what has been the norm. Like, they've been so close to like 6th and 7th all year, 5th and 6th, like in that mix, right? And this is the one instance where Leclerc has managed to drag this car up to the 2nd row of the grid, as you say, potentially have a chance at P2 by going around the outside of Antonelli. And instead it ends in absolutely nothing for him. It is savage, utterly savage. And then on the other side of the garage, no points either.
Lewis Spammelson at the moment, because you may as well have a bloody tin of spam with that performance.
Oh, got him.
More points in the book for that one. This was disastrous, Lewis. This was so bad. He cuts in front of Carlos Sainz at the start, and I know it's a turn 1 incident. Ben, thoughts on that? I think he shut the door a little bit too soon, trying around the outside of about 3 wide in turn 1.
He's a victim of his own success. He did it yesterday, right? And just thought, I'll do the same thing again.
The method is, if it try again. I just think that was a bit silly. It causes him to kind of lose the back end, drops essentially to the back of the grid if it wasn't for Max Verstappen coming out of the pit lane. Starts to make his way back through, but the pace is poor. I know that Colapinto, as Martin Brundle really tried to emphasize, he jinked to the left slightly. He moved like a centimetre, and the corner's going to the left. This from a 7-time world champion is scrappy, it's rough, it's poor. And I think it just shows the mindset that Lewis Hamilton is in, where I don't think he cares. I do not think he cares. And this just capped it all off. He wanted out of that car the moment that contact happened. Guys, I'm going to crash a car here. I've got no rear end at all. The balance all over the place. I've got floor damage. Help me, guys. Retire the car is what he's saying. 20 laps later, they finally get the message and they actually do retire the car. But I've got to blame this one on Lewis.
Yeah. It's just, again, it's one of those, what are you risking it for? It is Franco Colapinto in an Alpine. No disrespect to driver or team in that instance, but Lewis Hamilton has aspirations far higher up the grid than where Colapinto finished. And you're going to get the overtake done. And I know you don't want to waste too much time behind these backmarker cars because that is all going to work out in the end. I just don't understand why he's risking so much by, let's just say he grazed past him and it was all okay. I'd still be here saying, why have you left it that close?
You had the pace to get it done at the end of that straight. You were so close. DRS was available. Just wait to the braking zone, man. You're going to outbrake Colapinto for crying out loud. It's just such a poor choice from him.
At a circuit that, of course, has so many happy memories for him, I think he might just now be at the point of get me to next season.
Little question. If it doesn't go well next season, do you think he's done? I think he might be done.
At Ferrari or in F1?
No, I'm talking about F1. I think if it goes badly at Ferrari next year, at the start of a new set of regulations, if they're well off the pace, I think he's out of here.
Wouldn't shock me.
Bearman rises.
Bearman rises. And that is a lovely segue because he is who we'll be discussing next. I know he came up in the driver of the day conversation as well, but another 8 points for Bearman in what is turning out to be an excellent run of form towards the end of the season. We were looking at one point in this season, Sam, where it looked like he was going to be, if you take away the Alpine drivers that haven't done the full season, he was going to maybe be the next guy after that. And now all of a sudden, I haven't got the updated championship table in front of me, but he's got to be in and amongst the top 10 now, or at least contending for it.
Yeah, he's getting very close, I believe, to Hulkenberg's numbers, who I thought was 10th, maybe 11th coming into this weekend. Now, what surprised me about Bearman was not his pace, but it was suddenly I looked at the timing tower, and maybe those of you listening might be more astute with your timing tower analysis, your TTA, as we call it here on the podcast, famously.
Wow, yes, all the time.
But the way that he starts behind the two racing bulls, and yet I look at the timing tower, and not only is he ahead of Gasly and Hulkenberg, who he was by, he's so far in front of Hadjar and Lawson as well. The gap is, he's not scrapping around with them. He's not in that little queue with the likes of Gasly as well and Hadjar fighting for a hold the entire race. He's got past them. And he's just extending and extending. He's running his own race. Haas deploying a brilliant two-stop that make absolute perfect sense for him. I was blown away. I do think this was a better performance and a much well-managed race over what Mexico was. What a great way to jump on his form, to sit there and go, okay, yeah, Mexico was good. I could just rest in my laurels. Now I'm going to go and basically do it again, but better. And he's had far less chaos to contend with at the front to make the most out of as well. I was so impressed with him. What a way to round off this season so far.
Indeed. P11 in the Drivers' Championship at the moment, but he is now just 3 points behind both Hulkenberg and Hadjar, directly ahead of him. So P9 and P10 definitely in play there. Moved ahead of both Alonso and Sainz as a result of today's Grand Prix. He's been excellent as of late. And I'm running out of words and phrases to use for this run of form, but he was absolutely excellent. I still feel like he missed out on a few positions in qualifying. I still think that a second row of the grid might well have been on with the pace that he was showing, and he would have been potentially disappointed with starting down in what was 8th place in the end. Had to come through a bit of traffic early on, had to get the overtake done on both Racing Bulls, had a bit of a scrap with Gasly as well, but he navigates that brilliantly. And from there, he's able to just run the race that he was hoping he'd run. I don't think it's, in the end, cost him really at all that he didn't get a couple more positions in qualifying because, let's face it, in race pace, Russell, Piastri were definitely going to beat him anyway. But he just kind of, he worked this race exactly. He had a slow stop as well. Like that cost him like a second and a half, and it just didn't matter. And
the undercut was really important here. You saw it, and that is the kind of thing that could drop you back a couple of places. But he was so decisive with his overtakes. He got the moves done so quickly, and pretty much first time of asking every time. That a pit stop like that for some drivers really could have set them back. If Gasly had a really slow stop, I don't think he scores points today. I think it could have put him so far back down the order. He needed it to go right for him. I thought he drove brilliantly. But Bearman, even with some things putting him back, just a fantastic drive.
Yeah, and I don't love giving compliments for this because it's not inducive to great racing, but he navigated the drivers that should have got past him well. Like he didn't waste time with George Russell or Piastri or Verstappen. They kind of got past him very quickly, which you don't like to see watching a Grand Prix. But at the same time, if you're Ollie Bearman, you have to make that play. There's no point in costing yourself time for a position that is inevitably going to go. But yeah, very well done to him. Now, Liam Lawson ended up finishing in a very impressive 7th place. It's even more impressive as a result of a one stop. So he started on the soft tyres, went to the medium tyre on lap 19, which meant if he wanted to get to the end, he would have to do 52 laps on a set of mediums. That's exactly what he did with his teammate following him just behind. I was impressed by that.
Ocon looking around like, wait, you're telling me that it was possible? Why didn't I do this? Wow. Yeah. 52 laps on a set of mediums. Now, something we haven't discussed on the show so far is that this year's tyre compounds were a step harder than they were last year. Now, we didn't get to use the tyres here last year because of the weather that we had out. I'm surprised that we have gone a step harder here. And once again, it's proven that the hard tyres are almost useless, as they were in Mexico. The fact that the soft tyre and the medium tyre was so regularly used, and again, it's the same case here. I was a little frustrated at that. But because of that step up in tyre, it does mean that someone like Liam Lawson, who is willing to take the gamble, willing to push it, great conservation, great wheel-to-wheel battling and defensive driving to ensure that people stay behind him. I think the fact that he was holding up pretty much 3/4 of the grid behind him for a long time on very old tyres. His will-to-will racing has been so questionable, and rightly so. I really think he's been poor. But what a performance from Liam Lawson today. It's a shame he's only one place in front of his teammate, because this is the kind of day where you think, I'm going to gain so many points. I'm doing a great job. Then he's gained 2.
Well, yeah, I really thought he was impressive because, yes, I've questioned his wheel-to-wheel racing quite a lot throughout the year. But one thing I have been particularly impressed by is his tyre management. He did a very good job today. He did a very good job at the Austrian GP. You'll remember where he one-stopped when pretty much everyone else went on to a 2-stop strategy. And it was a bold call from lap 19 to then go to the end. But we saw, I think the tyres might have just completely fallen off a cliff in the last sort of 5 laps or so, in which case he does a pretty good job to hold everyone off. But up until that point, it's not like Hadjar and Gasly, who were on that 2-stop strategy, closed in on him very quickly at all. So he did a really good job of extending that stint. As I don't know whether it was the absolute plan when he put on the mediums to say this is what we're doing 100%, or if it was still a 2-stop race for them at that point. But in either event, definitely wanted to give him props, and definitely want to give Hulkenberg props as well, because 2 points for finishing 9th might not sound like a lot. It might even be more impressive. I know Lawson went 52 laps on the mediums. Hulkenberg has done 35 laps on a set of softs. It's pretty good.
He's finally turned up for a full weekend as Nico Hulkenberg. It's been a long time. The fact that he hasn't got into Q3 in the main qualifying session until this weekend, he's then delivered a brilliant strategy. He's made that work when his teammate is unfortunately in the wall early on in the Grand Prix and, of course, in the sprint race. He's held off Pierre Gasly, who I thought in a struggling Alpine was phenomenal. And the fact that he's kept that queue of cars behind him on tyres that are wearing out, I think he got a little bit unlucky that the likes of Hadjar actually got past him, because he was defending so well that he might be a little bit disappointed that Lawson has managed to finish 7th and he's finishing 9th. And when you're that far in the midfield, those 2 points do make a difference. So great performance from both of those guys. They can hold their heads high. Really good weekend.
What it means in the Constructors' Championship is that Racing Bulls have extended an advantage to 10 points back to Aston Martin now. But Aston Martin need to look over their shoulders because Haas are just 2 points behind them. And Sauber are still in play as well. They're 8 behind Haas in front of them. So those 2 points pretty valuable for Hulkenberg and the team to keep them in that fight. What else in the midfield caught your eye, Sam? We've got Gasly, just like he did in the sprint, scraping a point. Should we start there?
Yeah, I think he's just been phenomenal all weekend. The guy absolutely loves racing at Brazil. You tell him to have fun at Brazil, and boy, does he. The ability to fight with Hadjar in a car that I do think was superior. They put on a show, and we barely got to see any of it. They were swapping back and forth, less than a second apart for so much of this Grand Prix. One would dive into the pits, get the undercut. The other would dive into the pits, get the undercut. It was a real battle for the ages, all to result in them picking up less than about 8 points in total between them. But the Frenchies had a great time, and it was a shame that we didn't get to see more of it. I was so impressed. That was Gasly at his finest. There's a real good racing driver in that car. Just need a car to prove it.
Yeah, I think I don't want to say he's disappointed with a point, because ultimately that's far more than he's achieved recently thanks to that Alpine. I think he had the pace to be 7th or 8th in this Grand Prix, because he was stuck behind Hadjar for most of that second stint. I think he had the pace advantage on him, and whereas he was able to overtake Hulkenberg, Gasly wasn't. So there's a point gone that he couldn't get the overtake done on Hulk, but he might well think that he should have finished ahead of the Racing Bulls. He kind of had the pace to match them and maybe even better them. But even so, yeah, he really turned up this weekend, and he was confused about it. We heard as early as FP1, the only practice session, where he was like, the car feels alive, way more alive than previous weekends. And you could almost hear you could hear the confusion in his just written out words. But yeah, well done to him.
The other thing I want to pick up on, you spoke about all those cars fighting so closely together in the Constructors' Championship. Williams might be a little bit lucky that they've got their points in early, because, again, no points required here, with so many teams were able to pick up points, even 1 or 2 between them in Gasly and Hulkenberg. But not a good weekend for Williams at all, Ben.
Williams will be kicking themselves that they didn't do the same strategy with Albon as Sauber did with Hulkenberg, because Obviously, Hulkenberg scored points, only 2 points in ninth, whereas Albon's finished 11th, obviously good for no points. Albon wasn't massively quick this weekend, and I don't think Williams generally were very quick this weekend. But one thing that Albon and Williams did very well was set that car up to be a bullet in a straight line. Like, it was really quick on the straight. And if cars were struggling to overtake Lawson in a straight line and struggling to overtake Hulkenberg in a straight line, I'm pretty sure the same would have happened with Albon, if not even more extreme. I think they would have really struggled, that midfield pack, to get by Albon if he didn't stop. So I think they've probably dropped points today, Williams. But even so, like, the pace wasn't brilliant.
No, that's what's more worrying me here. They had to set up their car in a very specific way to even try and gain anything out of it. And they need a lot more things to go their direction to even pick up 1 point, maybe 2 points at most, where there are Haas's scoring, 10, 12 points. Well, sorry, not 10, 8 points. And there's the Racing Bulls, both them in the points. The fact there isn't one Williams even close really to that points. They were never really regularly fighting at the end of that Grand Prix for the points. It was always trying to get back inside the top 10. I think James Vowles will be very disappointing at how the cars performed today.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Anything else you want to pick on in the midfield?
I don't think so. Aston Martin went the way I expected them to. They big jumped in the Parc Ferme and it all fell down.
Yeah, hoping that the hard tyre would give them something, and it didn't.
I loved, by the way, the feedback when they were talking to Oscar Piastri. What do you think of the hard? Looks all right on the Aston Martins. Sorry, you tried to sabotage this man.
Yeah, that was the first point I thought, hang on a minute, something's not right with this championship fight.
You're just making this up, I think.
Yeah. Yeah, not a good day for Aston Martin down there in what ended up 14th and 16th. Shall we review our bold predictions?
I can do mine if you'd like.
Let's start with that.
Yeah, I said that 6 cars would be out, only 3.
Yeah, it looked all right early on. I
really thought we were going to get another moment. I thought if it rains a little bit, which it threatened to for a lot of the day, I could be on here. Another non-mover.
I can't remember what Harry's bold prediction was.
He said that there will be a completely different top 3 in the sprint and then the race, and there was not.
Yeah, no. Right, my
Sorry to pick up the point anyway. What was yours, Ben? So that Ferrari?
Fuming, man. Fuming.
I live for it.
How? This is ridiculous. I said that there would be no Ferrari in the top 5 in either Grand Prix. Today's race, perfect. 1 retirement, 2 retirement. Yesterday's sprint, we had a Ferrari in 7th. That's not inside the top 5. And then there's Charles Leclerc in P5. Exactly P5 as well.
After he painstakingly gets a move on Fernando Alonso, who holds him off for so long.
He was sick for most of that Grand Prix.
Watched it happen. And I laughed out loud at you, Ben. Oh, it makes it better.
Honestly, someone has, I'm on the edge of the box. Someone squared it to me. I've hit it with all the venom in the world, and it's gone off one post and then careered off into the other post and then gone out. Yeah. How do you get so close without getting it right, man?
The unluckiest goal scorer in the world. Oh. Well, to be called a goal scorer, you got to score a goal.
Yes, which I famously am not doing this season. So on to the next one. We've got 3 more opportunities to get our bold prediction right. Sam, what was your moment of the race?
I'm going to keep mine short and simple. I'm becoming a little bit of a Verstappen fan at this title fight at the moment. I always like the outsider regardless of the situation. And when GP comes over the radio and says, Max, I didn't think I'd be saying this at the start of the Grand Prix, but you are the leader of the race. Max just comes back with, not bad. And I was like, I really enjoy that attitude. It was just a fun little moment. I thought, fair play, you're a 4-time world champion. And even then, you're like, hey, that's not bad.
That's not bad. Mine's related to Verstappen as well. I'm just going to go with the entire Verstappen versus Antonelli fight. I thought it was just very entertaining stuff.
Right, man.
And even when you thought it was over, that mistake from Antonelli in the middle sector on that final lap kind of left things a bit open. Not that we would know about it watching Norris cross the line unchallenged, but it was an epic scrap between the two of them. And as you mentioned earlier on in the show, a bit of a statement battle for Antonelli, who not only has finished higher in P2 than he's ever done in a Grand Prix before, but to do it with pressure from Verstappen, hugely impressive. And I just thought that the battle between them was great value for money. On a
That's
day,
the kind of will-to-will fighting we live for.
Exactly. And there were a lot of overtakes today. A lot of them were slam dunk passes before we even got to the braking zone. But here, this is the type of stuff we live for as F1 fans, right?
I would rather see him not make the move, but every lap go, oh, is it going to happen? Okay, not yet. We're so close. I'd rather be edged for a whole race, folks. That's what I've just said, Matt.